Here's my mentor, Ray McGovern, one of the founders of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, which I guess is what Scott is talking about, sanity, right?
Well, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Well, just because I'm older than you, Marty, doesn't mean I'm your mentor. I won't take any responsibility for that. Scott, thanks very much for your candor, for your facts, for laying it all out there in the way you usually do. Thanks for Mass Peace Action hosting this event. I just want to pick up on one thing, and that is what troubles me most. And that is that most of our colleagues, most of our American co-citizens are prepared to be led into war with Russia. You said Russophobia. It's a whole bunch of facts, erroneous facts, alternative facts that have led them to the point where they are so misguided on the objectives and the danger from Russia that if Biden says, look, we got to put boots on the ground now, or if he starts to take steps that really would involve a situation where, as our defense secretary said, we're going to move heaven and earth to weaken Russia. As our president said, we're going to cause a strategic defeat on Russia and Putin should go. Now, if, as John Kennedy said, we face the Russians with a choice between more war or more grief and what Kennedy called, what did he call it, a humiliating defeat, the Russians have already made clear that they were prepared to use their nuclear weapons to prevent that. So what's my shtick here? My shtick here is education, education, education. And I got two items that any of you can use. One of them is, well, they're both brand new, okay? It won't take me long. At the end of 2017, Devin Nunes, who was head of the House Intelligence Committee, insisted that the head of the cyber firm called CrowdStrike, that the FBI hired to do the forensics on the DNC computers, that he give a report. What did he find? How did the Russians hack in? All that stuff, okay? And guess what? He got up and under oath, he was asked by Adam Schiff, now tell us what it was and how the Russians hacked into the computers. And he said, and then his lawyer grabbed this and said, he said, oh, well, actually, we don't have any evidence at all that that the Russians hacked or that anyone hacked those emails that were so prejudicial to Hillary Clinton. Now, that testimony went on, and this fellow's name was Sean Henry, said, no, we don't have, there's no evidence at all, no technical evidence that anything exited over the network or anything. So, no, there was no Russian hack. Wow. Now, why do I mention that? Well, I would bet that 8 out of 10 of your neighbors that you ask, well, what about Russian hacking? I was, oh. And why is that? Because that has been deep sixed. And let me tell you why. I said December 5th, 2017, right? Adam Schiff kept that under wraps until May 7th, 2020, all right? Yeah, 2020. It was released because President Trump said it should be released on May 7th, 2020. What's today, September 10th, 2023. It has not been published by any mainstream newspaper. Americans still think that those terrible Russians hacked into the DNC to help Hillary Clinton lose the election and give us Donald Trump. Now, all that stuff is right on the record, but nobody knows it. So you ask your friends about that and tell them that you could just look it up. And when I say look it up, I looked it up yesterday. And guess what? It wasn't there anymore. I repeat, the testimony, the transcript of Sean Henry, head of CrowdStrike, his testimony to the House Intelligence Committee on 5 December 2017 was not there. It's no longer on their website. We found it. We found it on the website of the Director of National Intelligence. I guess she didn't get the memo to destroy it. So I have it. What did I do? I printed it all out so it doesn't get destroyed again. Now, that's one thing. The other thing, very briefly, we're running out of ammunition. The president says, okay, let's give the Ukrainians some of our ammunition. And his advisor said, well, we're too low. We've given. Oh, so what else we got? Well, we don't have any more 155 millimeter shells for our howitzers and so forth, but we could give them, cluster munitions. And so that's what's happening. Now we're giving them depleted uranium shells, and that's what's happening. And what's the next step? Well, the next step would be, these little mini nukes. So we give them that, if push comes to shove. What's my point here? My point here is, again, Americans would go along with that from what little they know. That's why people like Scott and I and others are trying to get the word out. You've been fed a bad set of facts. And just to finish this off, I had a comment on something. I was at a webinar that I did just this week, and the fellow said, hey, these artillery shells, I'll read it to you. Running out of artillery shells, that's worse than running out of bullets. What it proves is that NATO was not expecting to have to defend itself from war with Russia. Whoa, now how does that parse? Not since my day, way back in the 80s, has there been any real threat from Russia. You can hear people say Russia wants to take over Ukraine, wants to take over Poland and the Baltic. That's all what the British call rubbish. This is a defensive war, a preemptive war, if you will. Putin ran out of other options, and whose fault is it? People are very careful. They say, well, it's mostly our fault. I'm not so careful, folks. I'm an intelligence analyst. I don't have to worry about my reputation. It's 105% our fault, and I can prove it to you. Thanks for letting me carry on so long.
Okay. Well, one thing I wanted to comment on this was that when people talk about Vladimir Putin or whatever, one of the questions is, on what basis are they talking about this person? And you can make various statements, but why should we believe you, Ray, or why should we believe Scott? What Scott says? But we do have another source, and that is Putin himself. In other words, if you want to talk about Putin, or we do have the option of actually looking at what he says and what his opinions are that he expresses. And there is, I want people to be aware of this. There's a newsletter called Johnson's Russia List, which is available free on the internet, that comes out 2 or 3 times a week, that publishes opinions from all different directions. But what it does also include is translations of speeches and press conferences, which is given by Russian officials. And if you want to actually inform yourself and not worry about being informed by others about someone, but what is that person actually saying, we still do have the option of subscribing to Johnson's Russia List. And I highly recommend it. And I think it's very much in line with the JFK speech, where he was trying to get at a more objective view of what is the other side actually saying and thinking. What was that?
Yeah, Marty, if I'm still on here, I just wanted to say that's quite correct. But, why should they believe Scott and me? Well, Scott and me were saying there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Yeah. Scott and me ran over to the parliament in London and tried to brief them right after the war and say, look, there aren't any. And Scott and me were right on Russian hacking. And, I have this edge on Scott. I've been watching Russian leaders for 6 decades. Scott can't match that.
Well, okay, Ray, let me rephrase it. If you're going to believe somebody, believe Ray and Scott. Okay. But if you want to go beyond believing people and checking out what is actually being said, I recommend Johnson's Rush List. Is that
But
okay?
I'll add this, Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, Ray. One of the things that made you stand out as an analyst was that I believe you told me once that if you want to learn about who somebody is, what they are, what they believe in, listen to them. Listen to them, take the time. And during Ray's time and during my time, the CIA used to put out something called the Foreign Broadcast Information Service. And they used to publish every day very thick binders of translated TV, newspapers, local newspapers, collected, translated, put out there to read. And what you find from a historical standpoint, if you go back and read what the Soviets were saying at that time, they didn't lie. We keep talking about propaganda, propaganda, propaganda. When you want to take a look at what the Soviets were saying internally about this issue, that issue, this issue, they didn't lie. They maybe didn't put all the information out there, but they didn't lie, and you would get more insight. And I think Ray got more valuable insight as an analyst, and I got valuable insight as an analyst by reading that than you do by reading the highly compartmented intelligence, the SIGINT and other things that the analysts would put together. They were almost always wrong because they're tainted by our own prejudices, by our own biases. But if you go and just read what they say, and you're 100% right, Martin, if you want to learn about Putin, he's one of the most transparent leaders there is. People just don't take the time. When he holds a meeting in Russia, it's broadcast. There's a record of it. There's a transcript of it. It's all out there for people to see. And if you take a look at how he has governed Russia, leading it from the abyss of the 1990s to where he is today, it's a remarkable transformation, but it's a transformation that wasn't done in secrecy. It was done with total transparency, and you don't see a brutal thug. You see an effective leader, a manager who sits down, who listens to people, who absorbs what they tell him, and then makes decisions based upon that to the betterment of Russia. So it's, one of the advantages you have in listening to Ray, especially sometimes to me, is that this is what we do for a living, or what we did for a living. So, we're doing the work for you. But if you don't trust us, and I always advise people, always take whatever somebody says who's not the original source with a grain of salt. Go to the original source. Take the time. And I think what you're talking about, the Johnson list, is the modern day equivalent of FBIS. It's a one-stop shop.
Very good.
In other words, trust but verify.
Trust but verify.
Quick question here.
Can I
I just
say
want to
one
say,
thing?
Yeah.
That Judith mentioned that there are interviews that Oliver Stone has done with Putin that are worth that are available as documentaries. You wanted
right.
to say one other thing, Ray?
Yeah, just a very smart thing. I thought it was all propaganda when I started becoming an analyst. And as I say, that was 6 decades ago, especially when I saw the word in Russian, Volstritskaya kravatitsy. I said, oh my God, that's Wall Street bloodsucker. Come on, Wall Street. And then 2008 came, 2009. I said, whoa, maybe what we have here, Volstritskaya kravatitsy. That's meant as a joke, folks, to lighten things a little up. Pardon me.
Okay. So we are about at our limit. And I wanted to thank Ray, and I want to thank Scott particularly for